Welcome to Normal Talk, Steve Rolls and Jana Michailidu. Steve, you're a writer and a policy analyst for Transform UK. And Jana, you are an advisor to the Czech Ministry of Justice on addiction policy and a researcher at the University of Chemistry and Technology in Prague.
Yeah.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you here. Just gonna jump right into it because there's so much knowledge about the field of drugs and drug policy between you guys. I'm just gonna start with you, Steve. How are you analyzing the situation in Europe regarding cannabis right now?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting. It's very exciting. There is a lot happening. I mean, there's been a big wave of cannabis reforms in North America, in Canada, Mexico, various US states, and in Latin America, and elsewhere around the world. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, that wave kind of hit Europe, and we started to see meaningful reforms to cannabis policy in Europe, beginning with Luxembourg, who moved towards a decriminalization model. They also allowed home growing, and then Malta significantly went one step further and allowed for cannabis social clubs. So you had a kind of formally regulated supply model, a kind of collective decriminalization model. And then the experiment in the Netherlands has started, where they're having, the coffee shops have obviously been there since the 1970s, but now they're having regulated supply to the coffee shops rather than this slightly strange arrangement they've had with it sort of illegal cannabis being sold legally out the front door. We've seen a similar experiment being started in Switzerland, with various cities having legally regulated cannabis as a scientific experiment. And we've seen some advances in Czechia, which I'm sure Jana will tell us about soon. And I guess most significantly, Germany has passed a bill. They have nominally legalized cannabis for home growing, for personal use, and for following Malta, a kind of regulated non-profit associations model. So even though it's kind of a collective decriminalization approach, for the user, it means they can join an association and they can access regulated cannabis products. And Germany is particularly significant, I think, just because of their status within the EU as the biggest EU country, and a country very much at the heart, one of the kind of big 4 or 5 countries within, and no disrespect to Czechia, but in terms of their political impact, they are at the heart of the European entity, at the European model. So there is a lot happening in Europe. In the UK, not so much. Bit disappointing. Given that Transform, and Transform, my organisation, we've been involved in a lot of these discussions in Europe. We've acted as consultants in Luxembourg and Germany and Malta and other countries. And we're very active in the political space as analysts and advisors and consultants to many of these European countries. And we've also worked in Canada and Mexico and Uruguay and Quebec and all kinds of places, and South Africa. And yet in the UK...
They don't want to listen to you.
No, they're not interested. We seem to be caught in some kind of time warp in the UK, where I don't know. I think there's a sort of pervasive fear. We're very much of change, of reform. We have a very reactionary tabloid media. Any step away from kind of the war on drugs narratives is projected as weakness and surrender and giving up to drugs, letting the drugs win, and drugs, like in many countries, but I think it's a particular problem in the UK, drugs get dragged into these populist law and order agendas. So there's a lot of political theatre. Politicians want to show how tough they are on crime, and drugs is part of that. They want to get tough on drugs. And so rather than following evidence and pragmatism and human rights and reason, they default to these tired old drug war narratives of, drugs are bad, drug dealers are extremely bad, we will fight them, we will protect you from this threat. And I think they've painted themselves into a corner in the UK, and they find it very difficult to get past that. And I think things are changing. I mean, public opinion is certainly moving. Public opinion has moved from maybe 20% in support of cannabis legalization, regulation, to over 50% consistently now. And I think once you cross that threshold, things start to move. They certainly did in the US. When cannabis reform becomes a political asset rather than a political liability, then you see the space for change starts to open up, because politicians, if nothing else, are self-serving, and you know they follow the votes and they follow the money. And you know, if there's votes in cannabis reform, you've seen in America, politicians start to line up behind it. And if there's money in terms of tax revenues or criminal justice savings and so on, particularly at a time like now where we're in a sort of economic pinch, cost of living crisis, a lot of economic hardship, you know, what with the war in Ukraine and the price of oil and the you know, US tariffs and all these other things. And there's a lot of discussion in the, you know, one of the other issues that is very prominent in the UK is about tax cuts and, you know, and the economy. If there is money lying around in tax revenue, and Transform have calculated is about £1.5 billion, which is about 1.5 billion euros, or maybe $2 billion a year in tax revenue and criminal justice savings from cannabis legalization, based on Canada. It starts to become a more attractive thing. So even though it feels like we're getting nowhere in the UK, I feel like we're also approaching a tipping point where suddenly I think things can change quite quickly, which is what happened with medical cannabis about 5 years ago in 2019. No one was anticipating that would change. Suddenly it blew up as a big issue because there were some sick kids with epilepsy, and it became a big sort of on the front page of these reactionary tabloids, and they got behind it. And suddenly everything moved very quickly. So some of these issues can move surprisingly quickly, even when you don't expect it. And change can come from out of the blue. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything from Germany. I wasn't expecting anything in Uruguay. I was kind of expecting it in Canada and the US. But and Luxembourg, you know, these things kind of bubble up from almost nowhere. And things that seemed impossible one year, the next year they seem almost inevitable. And I think we're approaching that point in the UK. But at the moment, the last government was terrible on drug policy. The current government, we've got a new Labour government, has been in power for about a year. We hoped that they would be more pragmatic, and they are moderately, very, very slightly better. But it's like comparing a huge pile of shit to a slightly smaller pile of shit. It's still a pile of shit, our drug policy. So there is work to do. I feel like we're getting there with public opinion, but the politicians are not lining up behind it yet.
Well, hearing you talk about the situation in the UK, it resonates with me as a Norwegian, because I feel like also we are living sort of in the past. I know it's now, but compared to other countries, we are very slow to adapt new knowledge and attitudes and ways of thinking about drug policy and just conversations about the drugs. The conversation in Norway has moved from we should punish everyone who uses drugs, and now there's like a political across the board agreement that you shouldn't punish those who are addicted or severely addicted to drugs. Those maybe we should leave those alone. But that's where we are at. At the same time, we did have a socialist party. It's not their name, but I don't know their name is Red. It's a party we would never. Yeah, but we would never expect them to suddenly become pro-cannabis legalization, because they have a history with prohibition ways of thinking, but they did. So things are happening. We have 3 parties in Norway now who are pro legalization, but the others are against. And I wouldn't say public opinion has maybe shifted a little bit, but it's not over 50%. But among the younger people, I think it's
rising.
Yeah, much broader attitudes towards wanting to legalize. About the Czech Republic, because I admit I don't know too much, right?
And that's okay.
Yeah, no, I know, but I do associate it with a a more proactive way of thinking about drugs and drug policy. Can you enlighten me? Am I right compared to Norway and UK?
Well, that depends.
Yeah.
As you say, you are like back in the history with your approach to drugs, but that depends which drugs you mean.
Okay.
For example, in my opinion, the Nordic countries are way forward in the case of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
The Czech Republic is very pro-alcohol.
Okay.
We have advertisement on alcohol. We have a lot of young people drinking. We have a lot of people who have drinking problem. Alcohol is everywhere in Czech Republic. So this is one thing. I feel like we are behind with the world. And I'm trying to change that. But alcohol is such a heavy and hot topic in Czech Republic that every politician who comes up with wanting to regulate more gets shut down, which happened to me, for example. But I will be trying anyway. But in the case of the illegal drugs, I would say we are forward thinking in the European context and in the global context also. And that is originally, I think it comes from the 90s. We had a lot of good experts that were really approaching addictions coherently and in complex ways, which means they were approaching addictions, not okay, we have some illegal drugs and we have to be really strict with the people who use them. But they said, okay, there are addictions. Addictions can be behavioral, they can mean substance addiction, and they formed an integrated policy for addictions, which I think was a very big step towards rational thinking about how to approach the issue. And then for some years it was slightly worse because there was underfunding for addiction services in Czech Republic. So we had a lot of intravenous users and we had a lot of infectious diseases among them. But when my colleague Jindřich Vobořil became the coordinator, things started to get better again because we started to fund these services, and now we are one of the, I think, best countries in Europe regarding the infectious diseases amongst intravenous users, because we have a lot of services for needle exchange programs and stuff like that. And also we decriminalized early, I think, in the European context. It was, I think, around 2005 or something like that. And so that happened fairly...
For all drugs?
Well, yeah. Right. We had, from this time, we had only like a penalty, like a fine for that. It was not a criminal offense up to some limit, of course. But then in the penal code, we still had very strict penalties for the drug offenses. So if you went over the limit, we were strict. Mm. If you were under, we were very progressive. So it was like this paradox, I would say. That is why our police directors are still saying to us, oh, we have very lenient laws, we don't need to go further. But we are always saying, well, we have people sitting in prisons for cannabis growing, for their own possession and for their own use. And so there are some discrepancies in our laws, and so we were trying to change that now in this government. Well, it didn't really. I was very ambitious. I wanted to change a lot of things, and I wanted to change them maybe too drastically, but as we all know, the politics is the art of the possible, and we got something out of it. We have some self-growing from January. We have some legal self-possession for cannabis only. And we lowered some of the criminal penalties for drug offenses. Not as much as I would hope to do, but it was, what we could do. We had a government that was fairly conservative, and a parliament that was very conservative. So I think it's a small miracle what we have done with cannabis. But apart from cannabis, we managed to legalize medicinal psilocybin, which is great. And this will come into effect from January also. And also we've made a new legislation regarding, we call it psychomodulatory substances, which is a mouthful, but we did it because
it's a made-up word.
Yeah, it is. But also we have a lot of terms regarding substances that are taken up already. So we needed to come up with something that is not defined yet.
Yeah.
So
psychotropic drugs, narcotic drugs, substances, drugs, psychoactive drugs. Yeah. So we need a new one.
Yeah, we needed a new one.
Okay. So what is this category?
Okay. Well, we needed to be very crafty because we are part of the European Union, and European Union is very strict regarding products for human consumption.
Mm-hmm.
They have very strict categories. There are drugs, there are supplements, and there are foods.
Mm-hmm.
And there is not much room between these. But we found a room. It was a little space. We said it's not drugs, it's not food supplements, and it's not food. But it's for human consumption, and these are the parameters that need to be obliged for it to be put on the market. And we made it so these products can be sold only in licensed shops. There can be no advertisement. There needs to be harm reduction information on the packaging. There is also standardized packaging, and there needs to be information about the dose of the active substance in the product.
And quality controls and dosage controls.
Yeah. We took a lot of the regulation from foodstuffs for it to be safe for human consumption. It's not as strict as drugs because those regulations are really very strict. But that's what we did, and now we have to put some substances on the list. Now we have kratom in there, which is a substance coming from Southeast Asia. It's a plant which has a very complex mode of action, but the majority of the action comes through interaction with opioid receptors. Not all of them, but some of them. But there is a lot of different receptors being activated by this plant. But it got fairly popular in Czech Republic, and it got sold in vending machines, and children were using it. So we wanted to come up with something so that children are not using it. But we wanted to use the chance that kratom is not internationally controlled, and we wanted to make the shot and try to regulate it somehow, and we did. So we'll see.
So when will that? Sorry, I'm interviewing her.
Of course.
When does that come in? When does that come online? I mean, when will there be regulated kratom sales?
Oh, it should be January. We will have a very big January this year.
Sounds like
or
it.
Next year.
So New Year's Eve in Prague is the way to go this year.
And I think, from a cannabis perspective, I think this the hemp-derived semi-synthetics.
Oh yeah,
that are a big issue. I don't know whether that's a thing in Norway. Is that a thing in Norway?
Explain.
HHC, Delta 8, Delta 0.
I would say it's a thing.
So apologies to listeners if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
But that's very interesting because it's definitely on the illicit market, but it hasn't. And I think maybe some places it's been sold like under over.
But are they specifically banned in Norway?
I believe so, but I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that's interesting. But we don't even know whether something's legal or not. They are very specifically illegal in the UK.
And I was just thinking when you asked me that I've heard that in Sweden, it's the shops have been trying to sell HHC because it wasn't on any list of illegal, narcotics. I've maybe heard of a couple instances where it's happened in Norway, but it's not been like a thing.
Okay,
I wouldn't say.
I mean, for the listeners who don't know what we're talking about, the whole synthetic hemp derived cannabinoid. There's different words for these, but essentially, some chemists discovered that you could take CBD, and you could synthesize CBD, which I guess people are familiar with, but which isn't psychoactive or only very, very mildly. And you could synthesize a whole series of other cannabinoids
from it.
Okay. Maybe 30 different ones at least.
Okay.
Including not delta-9, which is THC, although you can make THC from
of course.
You can make THC from CBD, but you could also make delta-8, which is also psychoactive, delta-0, HHC, and there's a whole great long list of them, and they produce cannabis-like effects. It's THC-like effect. We haven't really had a chance to study them. We don't really know much about their toxicology. We don't know whether they're more addictive or more toxic. But a bit like the synthetic cannabis receptor agonists, the SCRAs, like Black Mamba and Spice. Did you have that? You had those that were entirely synthetic. What happened was you had this series of drugs emerged into the world that were not covered by existing legislation within the EU or within the UN framework and international law. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people in different countries, and Jana can speak to the Czech experience, a lot of people in different countries started producing and selling these things because they weren't specifically prohibited.
No, yeah.
So, and in the US, it was crazy because they inadvertently legalized these things in the 2019 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp production for industrial use, including chemical derivatives of hemp.
Okay.
So they inadvertently legalized it at a federal level, which meant all of these things could be produced and sold legally anywhere in the US. And so you had this bizarre situation that even in the prohibition states in the US, people were selling Delta-8 and HHC gummies in gas stations with no regulation, no information on dosage, packaging to children, freely. And it was an extraordinary, and it's still going on. They
didn't backtrack.
Complete chaos. So they keep trying to ban it, to sort of correct things at the federal level. Unfortunately, it's a case of the horse and stable doors. I don't know whether you know that phrase.
Yeah.
Where basically an enormous industry has already been established in the US, and they now have a lot of money and a lot of lobbying power. So they're giving money to the presidential campaign and Republicans and Democrats and everybody. And it's very difficult to roll it back. There have been some bans on those products at a state level. Mm-hmm. In Texas, they've just tried to get one through. And a few other states, Illinois, I think a few states have banned it. But particularly in the states that don't have legal cannabis, real, actual cannabis, because the market for these products in places with legal cannabis is very small. Who would buy fake cannabis, shitty synthetic stuff if you can buy real cannabis? Almost no one. That's why there's never been a market for this shit in, sorry, with respect to anyone who's producing it. No, there's never been a market for any of these products in the Netherlands, for example. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a teeny market, but in the Netherlands you could just buy cannabis.
Yeah.
Who's going to go and say, there's nice natural cannabis or there's fake?
Yeah.
I think I'll buy the fake one. Nobody does that.
I might have to use myself as an example here, because while you're completely right in what you're saying there, and also as someone who's been a cannabis activist for some years now, not as long as others, but 6, 7, 8, 9 years feels like a long time relatively. Especially when you're fighting.
I started last century.
You're old.
The last century, because I'm
How are you still alive? You've been fighting prohibition half your life, and that's insane. Yeah. but myself, having been involved in so many public debates and discussions about cannabis, and most of it has been to fight stigma and to debunk myths about cannabis and what happens with users and stuff like that, the link to the gateway drug theory and everything, right? But I myself have passionately warned against synthetic cannabis. It's like spice, right? And now you have emerging, as you're saying, many different types of synthetic cannabis.
Yeah, and I don't think they're as bad as the spice.
No.
I mean, again, but spice isn't one thing. There's more than 100
Exactly.
SCRAs. I mean, there was acronym, synthetic cannabis receptor agonist. Anyway, the completely synthetic cannabinoid-like drugs. There's more than 100 of them, and some of them are really toxic, like really bad. They can give you seizures. People die.
Yeah.
People die. No one's dying from cannabis.
No, exactly.
But people die from this stuff.
Yeah.
It's super potent. It's super toxic. It's really bad for you. It's very addictive. It's become a kind of street drug or a prison drug. For people, because it's really cheap as well. Those drugs. But these new ones, and I don't think they're anywhere near as bad.
No, they're different, right?
They're different.
But we don't know too much.
I'm talking a lot. I think, Jana, I want to hear from you, because I went to Czech Republic and 2 years ago, and there were shops all over Prague selling this stuff.
Yeah.
So what has happened?
I want you to answer this, but I want to complete my point when it comes to the newer products.
Right.
Is that I think there's an emerging market for it, especially now that vaping has become. I don't know, but it's a thing, right? The vaping pens.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't really know when you look at the the liquid inside of, especially those one-time use pens that you throw away after you're using them. You wouldn't know what's inside of it. You can't look at it and think, oh, this is synthetic and this is THC.
No.
You have to be informed. And I got so confused when I tried this in Spain, where it was packaged with HHC, and I was thinking maybe they're doing a chess move here where they have THC inside, but they label it HHC to sell it legally. I don't know, because I couldn't feel the difference. And what do we know about the profile of risk? And it's early days, but sure you know something.
It is early days, but some of the synthetic cannabinoids of late are becoming more known. There is research for HHC. We have pharmacological studies, we have toxicological studies. It's really similar to THC. It is slightly less potent than THC. But unfortunately, even though HHC would be, from the toxicological side of things, a good candidate for regulation, it was banned internationally by the UN. So the most known of them is now off the table. So now, for example, in Czech Republic, of course, we banned HHC. But like a week after we did it, THCP was in the stores. We banned THCP. HHCP was in the stores 2 weeks after that.
I mean, I've never even heard of that one.
We have also HHCB, THCB, we have THCV.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, we have a lot of them. And but for example, in the case of Czechia, this is what really helped our case for regulation, because they were banning these substances each month.
Yeah.
And new ones were coming in, like week after they banned it. So we were saying, you see, this is why prohibition doesn't work. We need to see which ones of these are safe for people, and we have to give them something. They clearly have a need to consume something like cannabis. We can't give them cannabis in stores because cannabis is internationally banned and we are part of the European Union. So it is very difficult for us to give people THC in the stores. So, okay, let's look at the remaining cannabinoids that are being sold or that were being sold. look at which ones are safe, which are maybe safer than THC, and let's regulate it as psychomodulatory substances. So at the moment, we have research being done in our, it's a drug agency, like a medicinal drug agency. They are doing tests on tissue cultures. They are doing like modeling receptor interactions. And we have like 6 of them in this testing. We have 2 years to do this testing, and then we will have some data at least to say, okay, these are more potent than THC, because there are some. There are some that are maybe 10 times more potent than THC, but there are some that are slightly less potent, which would be a good candidate, because then people would have no really severe reaction if they don't know what they're doing exactly.
You always titrate the dosage. I mean, potency is,
Yeah, it is. But if there are people who are used to consuming THC, which is basically all of them, then you want to give them something that's similar, because even though we are aiming at people making informed decisions, that's not always the case. So you want to lower the chances of some catastrophe to a minimum.
So will you have legal sales of these synthetic cannabinoids before you have legal sales of actual cannabis?
Of course, because we are part of the European Union.
Right. I mean, I do find it, I don't know, is that ironic? I don't know. It is
ironic.
It's perverse in a way.
Yeah.
You have pragmatic countries trying to do the right thing, acknowledging the existence of drug use, and trying to pragmatically manage it through a public health framework. But because of prohibition, you've had these mutant cannabinoid drugs have emerged to exploit failings in the law. But also because of prohibition at a multilateral level, when you do the reforms, you can't legalize and regulate the cannabis that we know about and is a known risk, and we know how to regulate it responsibly. You can only regulate these new mutant drugs that we hardly know anything about.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous. It's actually the same thing happened in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when they introduced a Psychoactive Substances Act in New Zealand, very similar, and to regulate the synthetic cannabinoids, because they had been legal, they were very popular, and the government experts said, look, it'd be better to regulate these than to try and ban them, because you'll create an illegal market and you'll criminalize lots of young people. It's kind of like, that applies to all drugs, but anyway. So they set up this really good regulatory system for these awful synthetic cannabinoid drugs, and yet cannabis was still illegal. So you had this ridiculous situation where they legalize and regulate these shitty synthetic drugs, and cannabis, which is, it's not without risks, but it's considerably safer, and we know about it, is still
There's a lot of
illegal.
more data.
It's just ridiculous. It's almost as if prohibition doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
Almost. When you were talking about how they just kept creating new versions, I was thinking about, when you're at the carnival and you have this hammer and you're going to smash the squirrels in the holes, right? And they keep popping up.
Yeah, whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole. And you cannot win. And this goes for every single, when it comes to, if you arrest someone dealing drugs, a new emerges. The more you push prohibition, the more potent the drugs become.
The danger is, we had a very similar situation in the UK.
Yeah.
Where we kept banning the synthetic cannabinoid drugs as they came out. This was in the early 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
And each time they would ban the whole, they would do a big review, and it would take a few months. They'd go, yes, these are very bad, very bad. We ban them. So they would ban them, and then 5 more come out.
Yeah.
And each generation that came out turned out to be more toxic and more problematic. So what they were doing was they weren't getting rid of the market, they were mutating it in a dangerous direction. So prohibition wasn't working, but rather than regulate, in the UK, they had the genius idea to ban all drugs forever.
Yeah.
So we have this thing called the Psychoactive Substances Act. Anything that is psychoactive is illegal by default.
Yeah. That's the same as Singapore.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. There's a couple at Poland, I think, there's a couple of countries have this. Anything that is psychoactive, unless they have exemptions for caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. The really bad ones are still legal, and poppers, weirdly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
Poppers, yeah. Well, it was because of some gay Tory MPs were not happy with banning it.
Okay.
Understand. Yeah.
Yeah, understandable.
Sorry, we don't want to go there, but yes, so I am talking about anal sex.
Yeah.
But it was that is the nuclear, and you're not playing whack-a-mole anymore. You're literally dropping a nuclear bomb on the machine to kill all of them.
Yeah, this is
eternity.
Yeah, this is what
even future drugs. If someone invents anything psychoactive, it's immediately illegal. And I guess if there was anything vaguely positive that came out of that, well, there were two things. One was all those drugs are banned, but there's no possession is decriminalized.
Yeah.
In the UK?
Yeah, for drugs covered by our Psychoactive Substances Act. So we have this stupid system.
Wow.
Imagine that. Stupid drug, the way where the misuse of drugs, most drugs are illegal to supply and to possess. MDMA, LSD, cocaine, heroin, cannabis. But then you have these drugs covered by the Psychoactive Substances Act. They're illegal to supply, but they're not illegal to possess. And the reason for that was because when they came to do the draft the legislation, all the experts were saying, no, we shouldn't criminalize possession because, that would criminalize lots of young people and it would be harmful and stigmatizing for them. And, criminal records are, push people away from services and they won't trust the information. And you're kind of like, yeah. What about all those other drugs? What are you doing? So we have this really weird two-tiered drug laws in our country, but everything is illegal.
Okay.
But every drug that it ever will be is illegal for all eternity.
Yeah, this is
until we change the law.
This is what we were trying to avoid.
Right, but you did a great job. You should. I applaud what you've done.
Yeah,
it's
but
amazing.
Every day I was scared that some of the policemen, some of the prohibitionists in our country will say, "Well, look at the system they have in the UK."
Oh my God!
That would be great.
Do not take lessons from us.
Yeah, I don't want to.
No, please don't. We want to take lessons from you. And then, Norway. You may be a bit down on Norway, but Norway is further ahead in these debates, and certainly with regards to decriminalization stuff, than many countries in Europe. Certainly the other Nordic countries. You're way ahead of Sweden. It's a pretty low. It's a low bar. It's a low bar, but you're way ahead of Sweden. And Norway is actually a kind of voice of reason in the European debate on drugs, in UN forums, in EU forums that I'm in, that we participate in. Norway are they are in the sensible corner. They are in the sensible corner of the room.
Yeah, for sure.
We go to Norway for support for progressive human rights. Resolutions and for public health resolutions. Now, they may not support legalization of cannabis just yet, but they are definitely at the more progressive, sensible, reasonable end. And you can be proud of a lot of the things that have happened here.
Yeah.
You have a supervised drug consumption center about 200 meters from here. You have drug checking services in Oslo.
Yeah.
It's like
we don't have that.
No.
There's nothing like that in Prague or London.
I got to say something about that because when we started this podcast, and after I was done talking about Norway, I was thinking that it is important to make a distinction between the way drug policy is, the way we think about drug policy as a whole. Because what I'm frustrated about is the judicial segment, and that's where the police have a very, very big role in informing policy. They are regarded as very important voices in this field, and weirdly enough, they are viewed as having competence when it comes to drugs and use of drugs and actually health-related issues. But when you look at the health side of the policies, Norway is extremely progressive. The drug testing side is for now
informal.
For now, it's informal. It's based on NGOs doing it, and I think it's legal, but they don't know. But it's going to become legal soon. but more importantly, we have drug consumption places where people can consume drugs with health personnel present. We just started giving heroin to people who are addicted to heroin as a research project. And I work in my other job in the same building as where they do this, research. And it's basically giving free heroin to people who are severely addicted and who have not, been able to become part of it's a big program, rehabilitation program that's been going for years, where you give methadone and stuff like this. Those that fall out of that category will get access to heroin, which is great. And also they are studying what it's like to give amphetamine to people who are addicted to amphetamine, right? Which is also very progressive. So when you look at it, it's extremely progressive in many cases, and that's also part of why I'm so damn frustrated with the debates going on about it.
I think it's important to be optimistic about the trajectory of change in this debate. Yes, there is a very dynamic civil society. There are organizations like my organization, Transform. There's the Association for Safer Drug Policies and other organizations in Norway. And I think the vibrant civil society and Normal doing this great work it's really, really is helping, and it's getting traction and so on. But even at the highest level, the high level debate at the UN, between countries within the EU, these debates are very active. So the 4 or 5 countries, Luxembourg, Malta, Germany, Netherlands, Czechia, and Switzerland, they are meeting. The ministers meet every year for the last 3 years. And I've been to a couple of those meetings and discuss strategy. How are we going to get progress at an EU level on cannabis regulation? So that those things are happening. You have a ministerial level. At a ministerial, they meet every year and they have these meetings to strategize about how to make things move forward. At the UN level, you've got the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the leading human rights agency at the UN, has produced a report commissioned by the Human Rights Council in Geneva. They produced a report analyzing the human rights impacts of global drug enforcement and then making a series of recommendations. And one of those recommendations was to regulate all drugs, to legalize and regulate all drugs, not just cannabis, all drugs. So you now have a UN agency, the leading UN agency on human rights, calling for the legal regulation of all drugs.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And so the same arguments that are happening between civil society organizations at a national level, between member states at a kind of EU or they're also playing up at a UN level between the more progressive health and human rights agencies and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, which is the kind of prohibitionist entity within the UN.
Yeah.
They are having fights. And those, it's good. I mean, I don't like to, encourage fighting, but some fights need to be had.
Yeah.
And this is one that has to happen. And the UNODC is losing that argument. They're losing it because all their arguments are terrible. They've been overseeing a policy that has delivered the exact opposite of what it's supposed to for generations now.
Of course.
It's expensive. It's failed. Everything is getting worse. And that is what is driving the reform movement at a national level, at an international level, at an EU level. And we are seeing that progress. Amnesty International, the biggest human rights NGO in the world, published their new drug policy position last year. It's a brilliant piece of work. It's a forensic human rights analysis of all the failings of the war on drugs, and then it makes a whole series of recommendations for protecting and enhancing human rights in the context of drug policy, again, including decriminalization of people who use drugs and responsible regulation of all drugs. So this is one of the biggest, it's got 2 million members. It's one of the biggest NGOs in the world. It might even be the biggest. I'm not sure. Maybe the Red Cross is bigger or something. But anyway, it's certainly the biggest human rights NGO in the world, is now calling for the regulation of all drugs, as is the leading human rights agency at the UN, as are a whole swathe of member states, including Czech Republic, Czechia. At the UN, that Czechia routinely goes to these big sort of prohibitionist jamboree meetings in Vienna and stands up in front of all the countries of the world and says, the war on drugs is terrible. We need to regulate drugs. And, you know, I almost cried the first time it happened.
Oh.
And it's a beautiful thing because it's just like they are throwing down the gauntlet and demanding people pay attention, engage in this debate. Canada has said the same thing. Uruguay has said the same thing. Argentina, a number of countries, Colombia, you know, Petro stood up in the General Assembly. Was it yesterday? I think it was even yesterday. And we're saying, you know, the war on drugs is ridiculous. It doesn't work. Cocaine is less dangerous than whiskey. How dare you, you know, condemn us and send in fighter planes? We should regulate cocaine.
Oh, but it's very easy for us to say that, okay, you've been doing this for 70 years. You don't have results. So that's plain and simple that it does not work. And I think it's important to always say the alternative. I think the public health is the big part of it. But also, I think this is maybe what we focus on here. But globally, security is a big part of why drug war doesn't work. It makes everyone less safe. Everyone, not just the users, but the whole society. And mainly in the sourcing countries.
Global South.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for people who are in activism, whether it's cannabis or wider drug law reform activism, to remember that these are global markets and they are part of a global legal system. And what the decisions and actions that you take at a domestic level have ripples around the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, cocaine, you know, yes, there are problems associated with crack on the streets of Oslo.
Yeah.
They're also causing, you know, deforestation and abuses of indigenous populations and violence and undermining of good governance in Colombia and Peru and Bolivia. So, you know, decisions we make here have impacts around the world. And West Africa, where a lot of the cocaine transits through, some of those countries, Guinea-Bissau, are being absolutely devastated by European cocaine users.
Yeah.
It's really, really important that we understand that the issue is bigger than just cannabis, you know, and it's great. Cannabis helps open up the debate on other drugs, but we have to remember that the drug laws are international, drug markets are international, and what we do at a national, local level has impacts around the world.
But how would you respond to a very common argument, especially when it comes to cocaine? I would say especially, but also when we use the argument of cannabis, because in Sweden, gang violence has been on the rise for many years now, or in recent times, and it's become more and more extreme. And we've been talking about how, you know, the one of the main sources of income is income from illicit drugs, and cannabis being the most used illicit drug. The most income comes from cannabis, distribution, right? And we have seen traces of the same tendencies when it comes to violence emerging in Norway. And also those Swedish gangs are now settling in Norway because we're an extremely lucrative market. We pay a lot of money for our drugs and we're untouched territory, right? So we're starting to see that sort of seep into Norway as well. Also, obviously, it's been here for quite some time, but it's the violence and the use of explosives and stuff like that is a fairly new thing. At least the rates at which it's happening, right? So some people say that, well, then you would have to put some responsibility to those who buy illicit cannabis or cocaine, because when you buy your cocaine to go out clubbing in Oslo, you're supporting that cartel in South America. So what should the response be? I know what I'm thinking, but I would like to hear from you guys. Who is really to blame here? Is it the end user or is it the government who regulates?
Ronald Reagan is to blame, of course. But no, I think this is another argument for the end of prohibition, because if you have legal markets that are regulated, that normal companies operate in, that are not stroked down by the police every now and then you don't have the need to have gangs, you don't have the need to have guns, you operate like a business, which has its downs also. You have to regulate the business for it to be still viable, but also not bad for the public health. You need to regulate the product, you need to regulate the companies, but then you don't have to blame anyone because it's a regular business and there are people are protected, even the end users, but even the society in which the use takes place, but even the countries that produce it. But
you can start putting in things like fair trade, and environmental protections and labor protections.
Yeah.
You can't do any of that with illegal markets.
No.
In fact, illegal markets actively push you in the opposite direction. Exploitation of labor, exploitation of the environment. Instead of having regulatory systems to control a market, you use violence. And that is why places like Mexico and Ecuador in 3 or 4 years, Ecuador has kind of almost been torn apart by a huge surge in drug-related cartel and violence. And it's all to do with prohibition. There's nothing intrinsically violent about cocaine. I mean, sometimes people who take too much can be dickheads, but
in combination with alcohol.
Particularly if they've been drinking. But most drug-related violence is alcohol-related.
Yeah.
There is drug market-related violence is all prohibition-related.
Yeah.
That's true.
You don't see it with alcohol. You don't get people who run alcohol shops shooting each other or people.
You did see that during the prohibition.
Yeah. Except when it's illegal, right? Yeah. So absolutely. And the answer to cocaine problem is you legalize and regulate cocaine. Now that blows people's minds when you suggest it to some people, but we have two options. One is a regulated cocaine market, and one is a cartel Pablo Escobar cocaine market.
Yeah.
There's no third option where the cocaine market disappears. It's there. You regulate it or you leave it to the cartels. It's gangsters or governments. That is the choice. And it's not easy. It's difficult. It's complicated. I mean, Transformer produced a book on how to regulate.
A good book.
Well, it's quite good. on how to regulate cocaine. Mm-hmm. And cocaine is a complicated thing. And there's coca leaf, and there's cocaine powder, and then there's crack. And so but they're all the sort of the same drug. A lot of it's to do with the preparation, and there are lots of interesting arguments there. But if we don't do that, that problem is not going to go away. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And one of the bits of work that we're doing at the moment is around the environment, because the cocaine market is destroying the Amazon.
Yes.
It's destroying the rainforest. And not because people are cutting down the rainforest to grow coca. That's tiny. It's a tiny little market. What the problem is that all the profits that the cartels are making, they then reinvest in illegal logging, illegal mining, illegal ranching, extractive industries that are devastating, roads being built and airstrips, devastating the Amazon. And so all this stuff about protecting biodiversity and protecting climate, you can't do anything. You can't protect the rainforest and the Amazon whilst you're fighting a war on drugs against plants in the Amazon.
Precisely.
And you can't, and it's even worse than that, because even if you want to do climate protection and biodiversity protection, protect the rainforest, you can't even go in there because most of those regions are controlled by armed groups related to the cartels and funded by the cocaine trade. And they're often more powerful or have better guns and bigger, tanks than the government does itself. Yeah. So you can't even if you want to go in there, all the civic institutions, the police, the judiciary, they're all being corrupted by the cartels. You can't even do it, even if you want to and have the money. So, quite aside from any of the public health or even the violence and security issues, there is a massive issue of governance in the global south, and it's directly related to the climate justice. And, again, it affects all of us. If the rainforests are gone, we're all fucked. Excuse my language. Sorry, Mum. We are all fucked because, the rainforests are gone. There's no chance of meeting our climate goals. Keeping global warming under 2 degrees or 2.5 or 1.5. We're already over 1.5.
Yeah,
we've already missed one of them. But, this is, and it's, this is quite aside from, in industry and carbon release. And if the rainforests are gone, we're screwed. And we can't save the rainforests while we're fighting a war on drugs in the freaking rainforests. And it's, people aren't thinking, they're just not thinking. It's sort of like, oh, but cocaine's bad for you. It's like, I know it's bad for you, but people are doing it anyway.
Yeah,
and
that's
you either
true.
regulate it or we carry on with this generational disaster of the war on drugs. It's not reducing cocaine use, which is a bit higher, and the cocaine production is higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
We can't keep going on. And cannabis is kind of the same. And there are environmental issues we should talk about with cannabis. Like, why are we growing cannabis indoors when there's a big yellow bright thing in the sky?
It's really white, actually.
Is it white?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. In my pictures at school, I use
Always yellow.
I use yellow pencil.
Yeah, but I'm researching now, like, some kind of biostimulant so that we can grow cannabis more efficiently outdoors.
Without sun, because we're in Norway now.
Oh,
Can you grow
that's
cannabis here outdoors?
It's not for Norway.
Maybe there's a window.
Personally, can one?
Can one. Maybe, you do have, what's the English word? We call it drivhus, the big glass
Greenhouse.
house. Greenhouse.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry. Yeah, greenhouse. You probably could. There's a window of 4 or 5 months. Maybe we could make some things happen. But I would guess it's limited in the winter
yeah.
But,
to a very high degree.
but if we had an international trade,
Yeah.
you should be people.
Yeah, we
should be,
could
people
import-
should be
yeah.
growing cannabis
Yeah.
in North Africa because there's plenty of sun there.
Yeah.
Or Southern Europe, and selling it to the Nordic countries. That would be the sensible thing to. The idea of growing cannabis for European markets under lights for non-medical use
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
It's already showing in the US. There are already studies that show how damaging environmentally the indoor growing has been in the last years it's been regulated there. So there are already efforts being made for the outdoor production to meet the levels of quality that are needed.
And it's a complete myth that you can't make quality cannabis grown outdoors.
Yeah.
They even grow outdoor cannabis in Canada. That's what makes me think they could do it probably could do it in Norway, at least for some months of the year in greenhouses. Really, we should not be having any cannabis grown under lights at all. I mean, it's ridiculous.
You're talking now about the toll on environmental strains from electricity and watering as well, or just basically the lights.
There may be a water issue, but you can.
It's the air conditioning and the lights.
Okay, so electricity.
So in indoor lighting grown cannabis, outdoor grown cannabis is 95% less CO2.
Okay, yeah.
So it should really, for me, I think legal cannabis should, as we move towards legalization, we should use it as an opportunity to show some leadership on this and say all cannabis production should be carbon neutral.
But not to be too technical now, but when we're talking outside growth, because we know the plant itself, it absorbs a lot of chemicals from the air and from the ground as well. Could that be an argument against outdoor growing, that when you're inside, you have much more control of the environment than if you're outside? You're going to have a...
Yeah, it is a argument now in the Czech Republic, for example, because some people are self-medicating with self-grown cannabis. And so there are like patient organizations that are trying to put up some like manuals how to grow safely. Because cannabis is good for phytoremediation, which is like taking the bad stuff from the soil. But you can use that. You can clean the soil with the cannabis 1 year, and then you can have the soil ready for growing for human consumption.
You could probably have hemp first. Clean the soil, and then you put the cannabis sativa plant in there.
There are ways around. There are challenges. I'm not saying there aren't challenges, but and there's heavy metal pesticides. And nitrate fertilizer. Some of these things are tricky, but we know there's a lot of expertise in how to grow cannabis safely and well outdoors, and there are businesses that do it very well in Canada and North America. I've visited some of them. I met those people. They're massive cannabis nerds. They know how to do it. They know how to do it.
Yeah.
We really should. And I'm speaking to any of your listeners. Really, I would really encourage you to think twice about indoor growing. I mean, I know I grant you we are in Norway. It's maybe a little bit different. But we can grow cannabis outdoors very successfully in the UK in greenhouses. In fact, we do. We're the biggest medical producer in the world.
And that's in greenhouses.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting to know. Because
greenhouses use more electricity than just outdoor growing because they have internal climate control, but still about 60% less than growing under lights.
Okay.
So it's sort of halfway house. There's an argument you need lights for medical production because of the standardization is so precise.
Yes.
But for non-medical production, I'm not saying non-medical production is crappy, but you don't need that sort of pharmaceutical level of precision.
No, obviously. But while you're touching on that topic, because when I talked earlier, about how when you look at the health perspective within the field of drugs and drug policy, Norway is very we are progressive, but it's mostly when it comes to saving people from dying. That's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's the urgency that drives the motivation, right? And I forgot to mention that ketamine is becoming a treatment now in public treatment of what they call a treatment-resistant depression, right? So people who have had little to no effect of other treatment programs or medications will be given the opportunity to try ketamine, right? Which is really great, right? But when you look at the field, and this is really something that listeners of this podcast and especially members of Norway, but also Normal, care deeply about. I wish Norway cared more. Is medical cannabis, and because it is legal. Per se in Norway, it is legal, but it's very hard to get a license or a prescription, right? Doctors can prescribe CBD, but products are limited. You can buy it from what's the Netherlands supplier?
Bedrocan.
Yes, Bedrocan. They have the CBD. You can get it in Norway, and if you have chronic pain. Is some types of or maybe all, but some types of or some stages of cancer where you're maybe having chemo treatment and you feel sick and you loss of appetite and stuff like that, and
you can get the British stuff as well, Sativex.
I think you can. Yes, Sativex. Sativex you can get.
I'm not marketing for
British
products, but they were the first ones to get FDA.
Yeah, yes. Sativex it comes as a spray.
Sublingual tongue spray.
And is that a synthetic form of? No,
that's a whole plant extract.
Okay, perfect.
Interesting, which is interesting actually, because it was a whole plant cannabis extract that got EU and FDA, EMA and FDA approval, and it has THC, CBD, all of the other cannabinoids that I don't even know what they're called. Over to you, cannabis nerds.
CBN,
CBD, and flavonoids and all the terpenes and all that other people that the cannabis nerds get excited about. Yeah. All that stuff is in there. It's a whole plant.
I didn't know that.
It is cannabis.
I thought it was only THC.
No, it's not. It's not
That's Sativex.
This is Sativex.
Yeah,
it's not. Sativex is not a THC CBD extract.
Okay,
it's a whole plant extract that has everything in there.
Okay. But when it comes to, and that's great. I learned something new today. I learned a lot of things today, just to say that. But the thing is that, if you have some serious types of epilepsy or cerebral palsy, you can get cannabis as a medicine. But it's expensive. But some people also go to the Netherlands, they go to Denmark, they travel, get the prescription with their, if their physician is on board, they can take a form, go to Denmark, bring it back. But it's limited to, I think, only 2 weeks use at a time.
Can you do that and check it?
What?
Can you go to the Netherlands, get a prescription, come back?
I don't think so.
I think you can't, because we can, because of we're not in the EU, but we're in the...
Schengen. Yeah, people were doing it from the UK. They were going to the Netherlands, getting a prescription. Although can you do it still though? With after Brexit? No. No, we're morons.
Yeah,
we left the EU.
Yeah.
And all the privileges that came with it.
But I was thinking about when we talked earlier also about the synthetic cannabinoids, because we have been in discussion with the state, the government, that the part of government that runs approval of medications, right? And they're very strict. And like you talked about EU being strict when it comes to drugs, like medicinal drugs also, right? And they also they always say that you have to have studies that can predict side effects, and that's easier to do with standardized medicine, right?
Definitely.
Paracetamol, that's highly discussed in America these days. Well, but it's
it didn't cause my autism.
No, it didn't.
No.
Are you sure? Have you asked your mom if she took it?
Yeah, no, my father was older, so that's the reason.
Okay. No, but and that's the argument they use against giving cannabis to people with less severe conditions, right? Because we don't know the effects, and it's hard to standardize, and that's why it doesn't fit in like the model of approved medicine, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to talk down on normal cannabis now. I'm not going to do that. But would it be easier to standardize this if we're only using the synthetic cannabinoids?
Well,
is it only one compound, for example?
If it was just THC,
no,
or THC with CBD.
Well, you see, I studied medicinal biotechnology, so unfortunately,
I'll let you answer this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, I must say, in the context of how modern empirical medicine is made and how we standardize and how we regulate drugs, medicinal drugs, it's always easier to have a substance, to have a controlled dose, and you can test very, very rigidly how it performs in different people. You have 4 or 5 stages of clinical testing where you use different dosages against placebo, against different dosages on different people with or without the conditions that you are trying to treat. And so doing this with plant material, which is variable, which you can't get the same cannabis every time.
No.
Even with the most strict medicinal cannabis productions, you can't get the same extract every time because it's a plant. It's even if you control the genetics, even if you control the experimental conditions, it's a living organism and it's never the same. So it doesn't fit into the classical medicinal
molecule in a pill.
And our whole testing, our whole system is built around we have one molecule that does things. But on the other hand, we did the testing with THC alone. We did the testing with CBD alone. And we see that there is the effect of the extract, of the complex substance that is extracted from the cannabis plant that is different than if you apply it individually. So yes, it would be better to test the individual substances, but you can't get the same effect.
No.
I mean, we have a strange situation with medical cannabis. I mean, I think the first thing to say is, what does medical cannabis even mean?
No, you're right.
Because you're talking about a plant that has over 100 different cannabinoids in it, and then all the terpenes and flavonoids and other things that are in there that are active and maybe interact with each other, as you say, the entourage effect. You have hundreds of different strains and genetic versions of cannabis that have different proportions of all of these things. But then from that array of different active chemicals and different strains, you have potentially thousands or tens of thousands of different products. You can have extracts of individual cannabinoids or substances. You can have mixes of them. You can have whole plant extracts like Sativex. And you can have herbal products, you can have oils, you can have sublingual sprays, you can have suppositories, you can have a million different patches, topicals. There's all these different products. Which one is CBD infused hummus? Is that medical cannabis? What is it? When we say medical cannabis,
right,
you're actually talking about a whole taxonomy of different products. And I think as regulators, it's just it's totally
a mindfuck.
Total head fuck.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, they are used to dealing with single molecule drugs, and that's how the regulators. And they have regulatory systems that exist for good reason to protect people from snake oil salespeople and
quackery
and to keep people safe. You have to prove a drug works and is safe before it's available for prescription. That is how it should be. The problem is, because of the war on drugs and the lack of research over the last 50, 100 years on cannabis, you now have enormous demand for medical cannabis, and the regulatory systems simply can't keep up.
Yeah.
Because for any one of those thousands of different products, you have to go through 5 clinical trial stages, cost tens of millions of euros to make it happen. And that's just for one clinical condition, for one product, for one clinical condition. Now, if you've got 10,000 clinical conditions and 10,000 products, it's like, how do you bridge that gap?
You can't.
It would take 1 million years. It would literally take 1 million years and €1 trillion to make it happen. So something has to give.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to give. And I think if you look at places like Germany and some of the other European countries, they've essentially acknowledged that there is this problem. There is demand for cannabis that if it's not met, it will default to the illegal market or to recreational markets. But the regulatory systems that exist can't really cope with that need. So what you have is bespoke medical cannabis legislation that kind of exists alongside conventional regulatory systems. It's the only solution where you basically have a looser, it's still a medically regulated system, but it is looser than the system that you would have for regulating other drugs. And it's usually in a private space. It's usually private prescriptions rather than government prescriptions. We call it, you have a national health service where you have free prescriptions from the government. And I don't really see any way around that. I mean, I think there is an inevitability to that. And in many ways, it is frustrating for medical regulators and for some doctors. They're like, well, this is a messy product. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
How do we ensure safety, and are there risks? I think the thing with cannabis is that there are risks with cannabis as a medical product, but they are sufficiently low from what we know. The risks are sufficiently low relative to many of the drugs that they're competing with, that it is sort of just about politically acceptable for the medical establishment to go down that road. So for depression, for example, not depression, for anxiety or so, a lot of the psychiatric drugs in particular are really full on.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of side effects, and they're not particularly effective. So
then also you have opioids for pain.
Chronic pain, neuropathic pain.
Cannabis is definitely better than that.
But it's better for some people. For some people, it's not. Like any drug, cannabis-based medicines will work for some people. They'll not work for some people, and for some people, they'll make them worse.
Yeah, I meant better in case of the side effects.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but there's good evidence. The opioids, the side effects are so serious and so severe,
well documented, right?
Yeah.
And well documented, including addiction and death. These are serious. That you can make an argument that even if their cannabis is less effective, it's sufficiently much safer that we should be at least having it as an option.
Yeah.
We're talking about, in most cases, chronic conditions and people who have personal, subjective experiences that cannabis relieves their symptoms, right? And I do know perfectly well that sometimes if you are someone who uses cannabis, for example, for anxiety, right? And then in periods where your condition, your symptoms blow up or they worsen, you can tend to use more cannabis, right? In those periods, Also, you live in a country like Norway with prohibition, so it's not too cool to step outside with bloodshot eyes.
You're anxious about the police.
So yeah, so you're actually, maybe you're sitting more home, in influenced by cannabis, then maybe you should, because maybe you need to go out and meet friends and have, to get some fresh air and sunlight, if we have that in the winter. But I know that, those subjective experiences, they can be correct, but they can also be slightly deceitful if you look at addiction, for example, right? But who are we to judge, right? Who are we to judge? And I've seen so many people who are put maybe. I'm not one to vilify, for example, antidepressants or SSRIs, because I know people that it works for them, right? But I've also seen people with side effects that severely affects their quality of life, right? And they're put on this, and it's and in other cases in Norway, I don't know what it's like in your countries, but ketamine. Do you know Seroquel?
No.
It's like an antipsychotic medicine.
Quetiapine.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that.
Do you know what it is?
It's antipsychotic, and in the lower doses, it's used for like a sleeping pill.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But it has a very common side effect of weight gain, for example, right? And I don't think anybody really intends for you to use it for sleep every night. That can also affect the quality of sleep, I would suppose, right?
Yeah.
But these are medications that are being pushed really not so critically, and you're not being followed up. I was even put on some old school drug once, and I spoke to a doctor who's renowned. I don't know if you met him, Andreas Blomqvist. He's written books about. His book is called Illegal Medicine, talking about psychedelics and cannabis, and how it's been introduced as medicine, right?
Yeah.
And I talked to him about maybe because I've taken this for a year now and it works, and he said, well, have your doctor checked your heart, because your QT time or something can be affected, and he should be checking this every 2 months, right? No, of course he hasn't. Nobody's asked me about this. So my whole point is that these are practices that are just established, and it's a culture thing also within doctors, right? I do what my colleague does, and we do what we were taught 30 years ago, and stuff like that, right? So I was just asking the government to just please lower the bar here when it comes to like your high moral ground, because I can't see it actually. But when it comes to cannabis use, you're very judgmental, and you're taking away people an opportunity to use a less harmful alternative. I actually also would like to say something. I feel like an advocate for synthetic cannabinoids here today, but that's surprising. But do you guys know Dr. Matt Walker, a sleep expert? He was on. I saw him on Rogan many years ago, and it was really interesting. He's a professor at not Berkeley, but I think the other university that's close up in there in San Francisco. Their rival.
Okay.
I always forget their name. But anyways, he cited a recent study on cannabis and sleep, where they looked at I think 134 people who were about to begin using cannabis or something like that.
Okay.
And they monitored sleep. After 3 months, 5, 12, 18 months. Okay. And because the not established, but what we know is that cannabis, especially THC, can have a negative effect on your REM sleep.
Qualitatively.
Yes, right. But what they saw here within these participants is that when they first started using, within the first 1 or 2 months, their sleep quality had increased about 113% or something. And these patients were also reporting less anxiety. And after 6 to 10 months, the effects had been starting to go down. And after 18 months, they were left with maybe 10% increase from what they started out with. At the same time, their consumption had shot through the air, right? The consumption of THC was up by a couple of hundred, and I think CBD was up about 900%. So tolerance was building rapidly, and while it was building, quality of sleep was decreasing. But he said he's not an advocate for cannabis and sleep, but he even said that if we could take a derived compound of cannabis that give you this benefit, that they experience in the beginning without the tolerance or maybe negative effects that comes after some time of chronic use, maybe we could be onto something revolutionary when it comes to, for example, insomnia.
Yeah, of course, the endocannabinoid system is a complex thing that we don't understand nearly enough yet. And I think apart from the synthetic spice things that came up from studying the receptors and trying to come up with something that sticks to them, we should derive some medicines, because the endocannabinoid system regulates basically everything in our body that is from the vegetative system, so like sleep, also immune system, basically everything. How you, your intake of food, everything. So
why you get the munchies?
Well, yeah, but also how you like assimilate the food and get the nutrients from it, like
Right.
the whole system. So yeah, I agree, but also I feel like I have to say that we need to start recognizing that there are people who are using drugs. There are people who are using drugs from time to time. That's most of them. There are people who are using drugs every day. And okay, depending on what the drug is, this is addiction. But this does not mean that it's a bad thing. You can have people who use some kind of a drug every day and they live full lives, that they have good relationships, they have good work or education, and it doesn't impair them in some severe way. And then you have risk addiction. And this is the time where you are using to the point that it affects your relationships, it affects your health, it affects your life. And I think we need to stop stigmatizing people for using, even if they are using every day. So if someone feels like cannabis and using cannabis every day is helping them, I don't feel that we should say that it's wrong, even though they are using every day and they are for sure addicted to THC, for example. And so, yeah, I think we should be looking into some medicines that maybe are for people that don't want to use cannabis and that don't want to use drugs, those bad illegal drugs. But I think we also need to hold space for people that use drugs and to say that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
I also totally agree. I mean, I drink coffee every morning.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a functional caffeine addict. If I don't have it, I get quite pissy.
Mm.
I don't think I should be forced chained up in a cage until I'm clean, or some horrible language like that. I mean,
I just think that sometimes even in the circles of people who try to fight for human rights in addiction policy and stuff, we still, in the back of our minds, sometimes put abstinence on the pedestal. But I don't think we should do that.
Yeah.
Because abstinence is not the perfect and only perfect way to live your life. You can live your life perfectly well, even if you are not abstinent.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's a really important point that doesn't get stated enough within the drug debate, is that there are benefits from drugs.
Mm-hmm.
People derive benefits. That is why they take them.
Yeah.
If there weren't benefits, they wouldn't use them. And people do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, maybe they're not it's not very well informed, and the costs are greater than they know, or the benefits don't really add up. But pleasure is a benefit, and we shouldn't discount the concept of pleasure. People enjoy drugs. That's the main reason they take them, either to feel better or to stop feeling bad. And, yes, there may be some functional reasons. If you're all-night cab driver, you might take amphetamines. Some people who have trouble sleeping might take benzodiazepines or weed or have a drink. Yeah, and there may be some functional quasi-medical reasons. But, if we're not thinking about the benefits when we do a kind of policy analysis, your policy is always going to be wrong because you're only looking at half the picture.
Yeah.
If you're only looking at the costs and not factoring in the benefits, then your policy will always be sort of, you're missing half of the story, and it will always be misaligned.
Yeah. And while you talked about Czechia as an example of a country that you feel are lagging when it comes to alcohol.
Yeah.
I want to add, and this also goes for the UK as a football fan of Chelsea and a major consumer, major consumer of English culture in that aspect. I know alcohol plays an important role, and it's good, but it's also really bad when you look at the effects on alcohol consumption in society.
Liver cirrhosis, domestic violence, car crashes, heart disease,
cancer,
street violence, cancer. I mean, it's a total nightmare.
Yeah, and while we are good at not having alcohol commercials on TV, and we have chosen like a state monopoly version when it comes to wine and liquor. Alcohol has a major toll on our culture, and you say abstinence is held in high regard. Well, that only goes for the illicit drugs.
Yeah.
If you're totally abstinent, you are a weirdo in our culture.
And your beer brand is called Ass, which every time I come out, why is it called Ass? I almost bought some just so I can make ass jokes. Sorry.
We have Hansa here in Bergen. No, in Bergen. We're in Oslo right now. Okay, shout out Bergen.
Drink some of my ass. What's going on?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It probably tastes like ass. I wouldn't say. I don't know.
Yeah,
they're going to sue us. They're going to sue the podcast.
Yeah, it's
this show is not brought to you by ass, I would say.
But it's the same in Czechia.
Yeah.
You're not only you're a weirdo, you get all these weird questions when you don't drink. Are you pregnant, or are you sick, or what happened to you? Why do you? And just one shot, just have one shot, and this is going on a lot. And then so you maybe stop going to parties because it's too uncomfortable to be there and to be put into investigation why you're not drinking. But it's a part of like family life also.
Yeah.
All of the celebrations are infused with alcohol from a very early age. Also, we infuse children in it. We have like, I don't know if you have it in Norway and UK, these like pretend champagnes for children.
Yeah.
We had chocolate cigarettes.
Yeah,
we had chocolate pipes, but they were banned actually.
Yeah, chocolate cigarettes. Chocolate cigarettes were banned in the UK.
Licorice pipes
cigarettes.
were banned.
Yeah,
I like that. I quite like those licorice pipes.
And also we have a famous candy because this is, as you probably know, snus, like a chew tobacco.
Yes.
I
always know I'm in Norway because when you go to the urinal, it's just those weird little snoosy tea bag things.
And just on a side note, this is the government, trying to make it look less attractive.
It's so fucking cool.
This is coolest design that you could ever. I could have come up with.
I approve of the plain packaging.
Yes,
but they do. It makes it look like a military puck.
Yes. And you said puck, right? And that's funny because that was my point. Glad you reminded me because snus is commonly associated with hockey in Norway and in Sweden, right? So. And as a candy, it's been around for ages. We have a little black box called hockey powder, which is a licorice powder. Okay. And, here are pouches, right? But back in the day, It was not pouches.
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
just
you used to
laying
get it
around.
out,
You had
yeah,
to like
I remember
make
that.
your own, right?
You still get
So-
that in Sweden.
Yeah. You probably get it here, but it's for the strong-willed. I mean, yeah, it's an old school thing. But they have hockey powder.
Threw up.
Yeah. And also a side note, when we were kids, we tried to snort everything.
Yeah,
Where did that come from?
You were snorting snooze.
Yeah. No, candy.
right.
You were
Oh, yeah.
snorting candy, like and smoking paper. Yeah,
yeah,
that was my childhood.
Yeah.
Tea, coffee also.
I mean, snus it's also interesting to me from a harm reduction point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweden has the lowest level of smoking and lung cancer of any EU country.
Yeah.
Because they got an exemption from the snus ban that is that covers the rest of you. Can't have snus in
No.
chicken.
No.
Sweden got an exemption.
Yeah.
So Sweden, the great prohibitionists,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they got an exemption for because they said well, it's traditional use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They still oppose the ban on coca leaf in Bolivia.
It's the same as Norway has an exemption for mining and I think killing whales. I don't know.
Yeah, sort that out, Norway. Sort that out.
But
Killing whales.
But what's really funny, and this it paints a fitting picture of what we're talking about here. It's a recurring theme, the mindset of prohibition, and we're touching a little bit also now on the cultural, opposite poles that it's like the. In Norwegian, is cognitive dissonance, like the cognitive dissonance, right? Yeah, and we don't really want to touch on it, right? And an example is that, for example, here in Norway, when we talk about it, for example, legalization or just decriminalization, there's always the argument of protecting the kids, right? And so they blow up stories of kids are now younger and younger when they first try cannabis, or they're dealing coke in the schoolyard.
Under prohibition.
Yeah.
Those things happen under prohibition.
Yes.
If anyone tells you bad stories under prohibition,
Yeah.
that'll be prohibition.
Yeah.
It's not prohibition not working, is it? Bad things happen
Yes.
under prohibition.
And the propaganda is, for example, that cannabis has... Well, we can agree that while I think the tests are limited, or testing is limited, cannabis has become slightly more and more potent.
Yep.
I can sign up to that.
Sure.
Under prohibition.
Has it become 50 times more potent or 100? I don't know, right?
Maybe 3 times.
Yeah, right. But what's funny is that cannabis is being used as an example in Norway. But while we could also, like in the Netherlands, read about the same hysteria surrounding snus, that kids are using it, and it's so harmful, and the risks are blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
Because everything illegal, it's something mythical, demonic thing is latched onto it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the drug war is always framed in absolutes, good versus bad, abstinence versus addiction. And the fact is that with drug-using behaviors, we're talking about a spectrum of different behaviors associated with a spectrum of different risks. In the same way that you can have a wine with your glass with your meal, no problem at all. Or if you do that a couple of times a week, but if you drink a bottle of vodka every breakfast time, that's a big problem. And there is a spectrum of behaviors. People have to understand that all activities, all leisure activities involve some kind of risk. Even watching TV, there is some risk. Just stepping out of the bath, people die every day, slipping up and hit a crack in the head.
Even things that are good for you, when you're doing them in excess,
cycling,
working out is extremely dangerous.
Cycling on the streets is one of the most dangerous things that we do in the modern world, but the government encourages it.
Yeah.
Driving is dangerous. Being a pedestrian is dangerous. There is risk everywhere, and until we can understand the concept of risk and put it in some kind of relative perspective, these sort of binary good versus bad narratives of the war on drugs don't, because you can always find an anecdote of a child in peril, or a child dying, or something bad happening, and then go, look, we must stop this. And it's kind of like, well, actually, from an epidemiological perspective, and then everyone's going, going asleep. And actually, bad things happen. What we want is to have less bad things happen, and that might be going from 100 bad things to 80 bad things. Yeah. But you can still, if you want to, you can take one of those bad things and wave it around and go, look, bad things. This option is worse. we've got to get past that. We have to have a bit more sophisticated understanding of risk, not just at an individual level, but at a population level, and how policy influences that.
Yeah.
Then I can already feel the people listening to this podcast are getting bored of me talking about this, because it is quite boring.
No, it's not.
A lot of,
I don't think so either.
maybe not for us, but for drug policy and a lot of social policy and health policy, it is quite a technocratic exercise.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
You have multiple variables, multiple things interacting with each other in quite complicated ways. It doesn't always lend itself to a tweet or a bumper sticker or a political speech.
That's why I'm bad at tweeting.
She's great at tweeting, by the way. You should follow her. But it doesn't lend itself to a sort of, arousing campaign speech.
Yeah.
When you want to talk about a multivariate analysis in epidemiology and, risk factors interacting with each other, and we can get marginal gains over a bit, everyone's just falling asleep. But actually, that is how policymaking works.
But you know what?
Drugs are bad.
We stole it from them. When we were campaigning for the psychomodulatory bill, we stole the protect the kids from them.
Yeah.
We said, okay,
We're doing the same.
yeah, we need to protect the kids. And this is how we do it.
Yeah.
And so, because you're right. You can't win by telling the whole story, because no one will be there to listen to it, because it's too complex. But so you need to also attack the emotions, but to win it for your case, in my opinion. That worked for us. We really attacked the story about we need safe product for the adults, and we need to protect the children so that there's no vending machines where children can buy it.
I think it's brilliant. And you co-opting some of those drug war narratives for the reform is really, really useful. And the tough on crime thing as well. If we really want to get tough on the organized crime groups, we should take that market away from them.
Yeah.
Then they will disappear.
Yeah.
And it's true. In Canada, 5 years after legalization, 80% of the market is now from legal sources. So the illegal market and all the organized crime groups, and there were some pretty damn nasty organized crime groups in Canadian cannabis. Really bad. There was one called the United Nations, funnily enough. There was this
my God, really?
But they were violent. They were killing people. I mean, it was a non-trivial, it wasn't the kind of nice, friendly hippie growers, selling to their hippie friends. There were some really nasty organized crime groups. Anyway, 80% of that market is now legally regulated. Now, if you talk to some police or enforcers or government or a home office and said, look, we've got a strategy here, we could reduce the scale of the illegal market by 80%, because they've never got anywhere near that from policing.
of course.
In fact, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah.
They would go, well, that sounds like a good idea. What is it? And you go, well, you may not like this, but here's a book I wrote. And then we're done. Yeah. I think you're absolutely spot on, Jana. We have to co-opt some of that messaging and absolutely use the human stories as well.
Yeah.
We need to tell the human stories, not just of, poor, unfortunate people who become addicted or overdose. We need to tell the stories of people who have been harmed by the war on drugs, who've been imprisoned or who have overdosed because there was fentanyl in their heroin because they couldn't get it on prescription. We need to tell people who've lost family members. In fact, in the UK, we have an organisation attached to Transform called Anyone's Child, and that's what we do. We have family members who have lost members of their family, or members of their family being harmed and put in prison, or the people themselves who've been put in prison and harmed.
We have families against prohibition, which are the families of the convicted people.
It's really powerful because these aren't the usual suspects. It's not the kind of student with dreadlocks smoking a joint. It's not a raver with sort of glow sticks doing pills. These are like, middle-aged mothers who are very conservative. They go to church. They vote conservative. They read the Daily Mail, and they're saying, I think we need to legalize the drug MDMA that killed my daughter. And it's incredibly powerful. It's much more powerful than, the likes of us advocating on podcasts. Because those families and those people, they can get in the tabloids, they can get in the Daily Mail They get on the sofa of the breakfast TV shows. They get in the women's magazines because their stories are very, very compelling.
Yeah.
So I think a combination of co-opting some of those drug war narratives and flipping them, absolutely spot on, combined with human stories, is very much at the heart of winning this advocacy battle. Because, you know, if we don't do it, they definitely are going to.
Yeah,
for sure.
They're not going to stop. We have to turn some of that stuff around and throw it back at them, because our arguments are better. Obviously, you know, the history speaks for itself, and we now have good examples of reform delivering results.
Exactly.
It's not always, you know, we're in a bit of an experimental phase because there's different types of reform with cannabis specifically. You have more commercial models in the US, you have a more state monopoly model in Uruguay, somewhere in between in Canada. We have this sort of non-profit association models in Europe now. It's like a laboratory of change, and we're learning a lot from it.
But this is great for the data we get.
Fantastic.
From it.
It's all good. It's all good data, but we can do things well or badly. But that is where the debate needs to be. Not if we end the war on drugs, but how do we replace it in the way that meets our shared needs the best, whether it's human rights, public health, sustainable development, whatever it is. That is where the debate needs to be now.
Yeah, and I actually I listened to the episode you did with Ethan Nadelman, where you were going a little bit back and forth about, you know, the commercial models versus more restrictive models, right? And what I think is important, that whether you're pro this or that, I think it's important to have a model that fits the culture you implement, right? So you would expect American culture to embrace like this peak capitalistic way of thinking about anything, right? And to have different ways of doing it in other countries. I don't know too much about Uruguay, but I was a little bit surprised about, you know, having to register at the user in order to gain access to cannabis.
That was too much. I have to.
Did they do like research that in the focus groups where people said, I would do that? No,
they didn't.
But they were really early as well. So
I worked on the Uruguay model, so I have to declare an interest. But I advised against the registration system. I said, look, it's too much. You'll alienate people. They don't trust the government, particularly people who use cannabis. They're used to being persecuted. They're not going to go for it. They did, but what happened was, I think the retail model, which is, I think, in many ways very good, and they regulate potency, and can't get 29% THC weed there. So the limit is 15, I think, or 18. And it's plain packaging, a bit like your snus, or a bit like in Canada, where I also worked. But they were under enormous pressure from Argentina and Brazil. Because they didn't want people to go across from, you know, into Montevideo from Buenos Aires, buy a load of weed and bring it back.
Okay.
So they were under a lot of pressure from these giant countries either side of them. And the idea was basically that the registration system was to keep out non-residents, tourists.
Wow.
And it was too much. I agree, it was too much. But interestingly, what happened is that they also had a club model, and I can take some pride in this. They also had a club model and a home-growing model, and a medical model. So there were 4 tiers. You had the pharmacy retail sales, home-growing, the non-profit associations, and the medical model. Great. But what happened was, because the retail model was too restrictive, it was only from pharmacies, and you had to register. And not that many pharmacies wanted to do it. But what's happened is that there is now 10 times more cannabis supplied through the clubs and home growing than the shops. You know, and because the shops were too restrictive. You can go too far the other way, I think. I was in New York last week for the General Assembly. And I was given a tour of some of these equity cannabis shops, and they're just mind-blowing. I mean, it's like going into an Apple store, and there's hundreds of these beautifully branded, designed sort of gourmet cannabis products. And part of me kind of quite likes it, but part of me, I'm also worried about it. I don't, you know, generally we advise against branding. I worked in Canada on the Canadian Federal Task Force, and you can see the cannabis products in Canada are all plain packaging. They have a little tiny logo that is smaller than the THC warning logo. And loads of people have opened shops, loads of people are making loads of money. There are lots of businesses doing well. 80%, as I've already said, of the market is now legally supplied. So they had plain packaging, and they still have a thriving legal cannabis market. I don't think you need all these super high-end gourmet branded things. There was crazy stuff. There was like pre-rolled joints made with rose petals in New York, and all kinds of flavored drinks, and I mean, and gummies and all kinds of, and I'm sort of like, I don't quite know, because part of me quite likes it, but also from a public health perspective, I'm like, putting drugs in sweets seems like a bad idea. And you know, and you see when they start selling drugs in sweets, pediatric poisonings go up. It's not huge numbers. It's not like a huge public health.
No, it shouldn't surprise anyone, right?
No, but they actually in Quebec was the only provincial government I worked on, and I was adamant with them. I said, look, have edibles, but just don't have them in sweets. You know, have oil with the pipette, and you can put it on whatever you like, or have something else, but that's not it doesn't look like candy. Definitely don't have pack. Anyway, they went. I went back to I didn't know. I met someone from Quebec the other last year, and they were going, we've finally got edibles, but some idiot in the government, they put them in dried cauliflower. Dried cauliflower infused with cannabis.
Oh my god!
And dried figs. So they're like,
that's better.
So they're kind of like that. You can get edibles in Quebec now. But it's dried vegetables. And this guy
could be a surge. This guy vegans going to the infirmary now with poisoning.
This guy was moaning about it, and I was going, "Oh, actually, that might have been me. I'm really sorry about that." But the thing is, my thing was like, you know, if you, I get it. I see all these beautiful sort of artisanal cannabis edibles and on sale in Colorado and New York and places, and I get it, and they look beautiful, and I'm sure they taste great. And they get you high, obviously. But my thing was like, look, just take a oil pipette. You can titrate exactly how much you need. Put it on a Oreo biscuit or something. And if you want some gummies, just buy a bag of fucking Haribo. You don't need. You don't put. If you put drugs in sweets, kids are going to eat them and end up in hospital. And now they're putting psilocybin gummies. So everything. And kratom gummies. But
we have also muscimol gummies.
Right. What's that? It's the
Others from Amanita muscaria.
Okay.
It's like the famous red mushroom with dots on it.
Poisonous mushroom.
In Norwegian. We know. Yeah.
And they're pretty toxic, right?
Well, we had people in the hospital and nearly dying from that.
They're putting them in gummies.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it. You can buy them illegally in Colorado and
you can buy them legally in Czech.
People ending up in hospital. Just as a regulator, public health person, I would say don't put drugs in sweets. It also seems like a bad idea.
But also, I think it's important to say that we should be really careful in these first iterations of the regulation, because we can always make it more lenient. We can always make it less strict if we see good results, if we see that we are progressing somewhere. But if there is too many incidents, if there is some horrible catastrophe correlated with the regulation, it will go back. And it happened with psychedelics in the 60s. And we can't have it.
There was massive campaigning. We shouldn't underestimate the effects of it, right? But at the same time, there was a lot of uncritical use that was becoming widespread in different aspects of culture, right? I remember when I was last time, actually, I think it was, I was in California. It was 2017. Right before they went fully legal.
Right, they had the quasi-medical.
Yes, and my friend who I visited, he had to go. I couldn't go because I wasn't a citizen, but he had a church. He was a member of, where he would go in and buy different products for me, like granola bars with cannabis, lemonade with cannabis, regular flour cannabis, gummy bear cannabis.
It doesn't sound like a conventional church or a medical. I mean,
No.
I went in some of those dispensaries, and they were not medical establishments.
So what they did was he picked out what he wanted, and then he gave a donation as payment, right? So they bylined some regulatory,
And taxing.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I was.
But I remember coming straight from prohibition into this world, and laying on his couch that same night, not actually feeling my legs too much because I'd consumed cannabis in every possible way. I thought this is the future. I have changed my mind on that since. But I like some diversity of products. And I was joking in another conversation I was having the other day where I said that my personal goal is to have the opportunity to choose maybe a less harmful product. Right? I don't like to smoke anymore. I like to vape, but I feel like that also is. Do you talk about
Try this new cannabis-infused cauliflower.
Yeah, definitely. But maybe some gummy bears, right? I could just eat them and not take the toxic effects of inhaling it. No, I'm totally with you, Steve. But the thing is that, and I was joking that I'm no longer for legalization because that shit actually exists on the streets here in Oslo now.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not like it's brought in from a legal country. They're making it at home.
Oh.
They're making their own little gummy bears with gelatin and, they even had some sugar on it, like the Haribo ones, right?
Oh my God.
But it was really good.
Okay.
It was actually really good. Not like the ones with 1,000 milligrams or whatever they put in the America, right? That's just insane.
Yeah.
But I am pro diverse catalog.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally agree with not having it as candy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jana that it makes sense politically and from a public health research point of view to start more conservatively.
Yeah.
And it's easy. It's much easier to relax things than it is to ramp them up.
Yeah.
Once the horse is bolted, once the cat is out the bag, whatever metaphor you use, it's very hard to put it back. And we've seen that with the fight against tobacco. The fight for tobacco regulation has taken 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of there now. We've kind of finally we regulate tobacco in an appropriate way in most European countries, but it's taken generations to get there. So it's really important that we start slowly. And one of the things Canada did that the task force and the people I was working with, we all recommended was to have a phased rollout. So the first 2 years is just herbal, and then after that you can start to introduce oils and vapes and edibles and so I mean they have edibles in Canada now, and they have seen a rise in child A&E admissions. I mean, it's not a big problem. None of them died. They all recover with fairly quick.
Mm-hmm.
But except in Quebec, they have the lowest level of child.
Because they have the
child pediatric admissions. I mean, and part of me, I'm looking at that going, okay, you may not like the cannabis-infused dried cauliflower, but from a political and public health point of view, it was a success.
Yeah.
And you can buy oil. If you want to buy oil and squirt it...
Put it on whatever you like.
Squirt it on a bag of Haribo and eat them. Yeah. Go for your life.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. I totally agree, actually.
So, I have friends in the US who make artisanal gummy-type products. They make these beautiful, artisanal, lovely cannabis edible things, and I feel bad saying I
don't agree with you.
It just but it makes life difficult for the likes of us advocating for reform and change in Europe, because the politicians will keep pointing to the gummy bears and go, look, they're putting drugs in sweets and giving them out in school playgrounds. And, it makes life and I have said that to my US colleagues as well. It's like the problem with your beautiful artisanal gummy whatever is that it makes life difficult for me. It makes life difficult for us advocating in Europe. So my thing is, let's start with just herbal cannabis, maybe some resin or maybe some oil or something. But let's having this sort of everything, the infused beverages and the infused. They're infusing everything now, and it's just it's a concern. So I yes, we can get there, but I think we need to take small steps and and see how things are going. First,
how they play out. Because there's only one incident, one story, negative story, and it could blow up totally out of proportion and out of control, right? So
need one kid dying, or
of course,
falling off a bridge or drowning, or and they had some gummy bear. Bang. Everything blows back for 2-3 years.
We actually do have. It's not like it's too relevant to this, but there is a story that maybe depicts a little bit about that point. Is that there was a case a couple of years ago. Young man attacked his friends with a knife. On Halloween, actually. I think it was on Halloween, and I'm not sure.
He's wearing a scream mask.
I don't know, but it was terrifying for those involved, obviously, right?
Sorry,
and
I didn't mean to joke.
No, that's okay. But the thing is that he was under the influence of cannabis, right? So this did establish as the narrative, of course, was that look what cannabis does to you, right? What people don't know or never talk about is that he was found to be, what's it called when you are found to be not, he was like in insanity in the moment.
Psychotic.
He was psychotic. So he wasn't found guilty in that sense.
Okay.
He would have if he just took a bunch of amphetamines and became crazy after not sleeping, right? But they established that he had schizophrenia or some other disease or condition that was latent, and that they found that cannabis wasn't the main reason for this, right? So what happened in the court was much more nuanced than what happened in the public opinion, public eye, right? And that could very easily happen again. Everywhere at any time.
It's a big issue in the UK because every time there's a violent incident or a murder or something happens, people will look into it, and they'll, a lot of these people have got mental health problems. People with mental health problems generally have high levels of all drug use.
Yes.
Including cannabis use. Now, the cannabis may make things worse for some of these people.
Especially the potent kind.
Right. I would never dispute that. It may make things worse. It may precipitate a psychotic episode. That may result in violence. But then, if you look at the violence related to drugs, alcohol, again, is vastly disproportionately.
Yeah.
And we don't ban that. We try and educate people about sensible use. And people who have problems with alcohol, we try and get them the services and support they need. It's a difficult one because it is used by the prohibitionists all the time. If more young people are using cannabis, there'll be more psychosis, there'll be more massacres and murders, and horrible things happen. It's difficult. A lot of people, they probably don't even, they use cannabis and they end up playing Call of Duty or watching, Rick and Morty. And they're not, that actually reduces violence because they don't go out. It's a bit like driving, cannabis driving. People who are stoned generally would not bother wanting to drive anywhere. Because they can't be bothered.
Talking about that, because that's
not to stigmatize people who use cannabis.
No.
They'd rather chill.
Yeah.
Do
typically,
go fighting.
Yeah. And one example I often use when we talk about especially how we treat kids who use drugs, legal and illegal drugs, because and many Norwegians don't know this, that what the law says is you got to be 18 or older to buy beer or sell beer. You can't work in a store and sell beer until you're 18. You can't buy it until you're 18, and you got to be 20 to buy a beer and wine, and 20 to buy liquor, right? But what happens to those under who use it? Because there is no prohibition against minors using alcohol. Right. That's not illegal.
No.
So if the police see a bunch of kids drinking in public, they're asked to pour it out, because it's not legal to drink in public, but they're not driving these kids to the police station or giving them a criminal record. but the same kids meet in a cellar apartment playing PlayStation. They could, and smoking a joint, they could have their door kicked in and given a criminal record.
The legal drinking age in the UK is 5. Imagine
What?
It's 5.
I saw a video about this.
You can drink if you're 5.
the other day.
If you're 5 or over, you can drink.
Yeah.
You can't buy it. You can't go to a pub.
No. But you can, but you can have it in a restaurant with your family, can't you?
Weirdly specific.
When you're 14,
Okay.
16, I think.
Okay.
16.
What?
And then 18 to buy in a pub.
Yeah.
But
Why
yeah,
do you have it specified?
I don't know. It's weird. It's just one of these weird, quirky bits of law, but it doesn't apply to any other drugs.
Remember,
You can't. Can you
imagine the debate.
Cocaine, I think 7. I think we should have.
Yeah.
Heroin, maybe 6. No, obviously, I don't know. It's just one of those crazy quirks.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's almost like our drug laws are stupid.
Yeah, almost. But I've heard people trace like the role alcohol plays in culture that goes back to like when water was contaminated, and a cider or beer was healthier than the water in the, I don't know, in the river. I don't know how this works, or in the cities. I don't know. But maybe that's why that you said that 5-year-olds are growing and they're not breastfeeding anymore. They need to have a beer.
They need some gin.
Yeah.
Help them sleep.
Yeah, we actually have to go in for some sort of landing. But I want to ask you one thing before we go, and you one thing for you. So I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Because I mentioned vaping earlier. I had this when I was a frequent user of cannabis. I switched from smoking joints to vaping, and I bought this German industrial vaporizer.
Okay.
Craftsmanship from Germany, and I vaped my cannabis flower. And in maybe recent times, I've also tried those vaping pens, right? And I was under the impression that it's much healthier and much better for you to vape it than to smoke it. But then you had kids around the same time at the pandemic, but it was vitamin E oil that
Acetate.
yes, that people died from actually vaping, right? So
It was prohibition.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, not regulated. But what do we know? Do we know anything about vaping? Is it worse than we thought, or is it?
Well, we need to really define the terms. We have like smoking, that's defined pretty clearly. But then we talk about vaping, and it's two different things. When you vape, when you heat up a herb, when you inhale it's not just aerosols, it's not really burning, but it's something in between. But then you have vaping in the newer sense, which is you have some liquid in which you have infused these cannabinoids. You have extract or you have pure cannabinoids in there. And these have vastly different risks. Smoking, of course, is the worst of these three. The vaping is clearly better than the smoking because you don't have some of the carcinogenic substances in such high amounts as in the smoke, but you have higher amounts of different substances which we don't really have a lot of information about to this date because they were not so prevalent in the smoke, so they were not really studied too much. The longitudinal effects, so like if you do it every day for 30 years, we don't have the data for that. But it is better than smoking. When we look at the vaping, like the e-liquids or the liquids and the aerosols that are formed, when you have a vape pen, which is properly regulated, that means you don't have some, because the vitamin E acetate was just one ingredient, that there were a lot of different, it was basically, a lot of them were flavors, which were added to the liquids that were dangerous, that were producing the popcorn lung, which was, it was quoted in the tabloids a lot.
Don't have the butterscotch one.
No.
Yeah. But
I'm not joking. Don't do the butterscotch one.
yeah, but then there is potential danger if the mechanism of the heating itself is not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
You can have heavy metals infusing into the liquid when it is heated from the coil that is heating up the liquid. But again, that's what regulation's for. If you have the materials that are steady enough to not leak the metals into, then the vaping is the safest out of these three.
Mm.
Of course, there is still some risk from exposing the lungs to the propylene glycol, which is most of the time the liquid that the cannabinoids are infused in. But these are risks that are incomparably lower than if you were smoking or vaping the dry herb. So yeah, that's the data we have. It's very similar for nicotine and tobacco products. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
So, but this is actually regulating the vape pens is really, really important.
Yeah.
Unregulated vape pens are potentially very risky.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with not just the unregulated cartridges, the actual pens themselves.
Yeah.
And people need to understand this. It's not just the cartridges that are a problem. It's shitty pens that can leak heavy metals into the oil.
And I've seen also that a lot of the pens they overheat. Way more than you would than you have to, right? Yeah. But we talked about the German craftsmanship I had, where you could regulate temperature from 20 up to 230, right? Mm-hmm. So you could adjust it and with fine margins.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if people are using illegal cannabis vape pens, don't get the cheapest ones.
Yeah.
Spend a bit of money. It's going to be safer. It's going to work out better in the long run. And I'm not advocating for any particular brands, but get the better ones. They are safe.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable. And I also want to ask you, Steve, if you have to predict, and you do now, what's the next country in Europe? Because I've heard Italy is coming out with some legalization pretty soon, but I've been hearing it for years. So what's going on? What's the next country? It's not Norway, not Sweden.
I think Denmark is very close.
I think so too.
I think Spain is very interesting. I mean, they have over 1,000 cannabis social clubs already. Mm-hmm. A lot of the autonomous regions in Spain really want to legalize and regulate properly, but the federal government is allowing them. There's this strange situation in the federal government where you have the three socialist parties all support legalization, regulation of cannabis, and they are a majority, but they hate each other so much that they won't agree. It's pathetic. It's just stupid.
The leftists.
The leftists being idiot.
We have the same tendencies, you know.
You actually have a parliamentary majority for legalization in federal government in Spain, but it's not happening because of stupid, childish internal politics on the left mostly. Italy, like you say, they've been having bills have been tabled and referendums have happened on and off for 20 years. I think something could happen. Something could move pretty fast in Spain or Italy or Denmark. Those would be the ones I would predict. But I didn't predict Luxembourg, or certainly did not predict Malta. I didn't predict Germany. We knew things were happening in Switzerland and Czechia and the Netherlands, but Malta beat all of them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to predict. I mean, I think we know the ones that aren't going to lead.
Yeah,
Sweden,
that's for sure.
France,
Poland.
Slovakia.
Slovakia.
Some of the sort of very conservative.
Yeah.
But even conservative. It's a final point. I know I don't want to drag this out for too long, but it's an interesting reality that actually drug law reform does not sort of divide down left and right.
No, that's true.
Yeah. It hasn't been sucked into kind of binary left and right culture wars.
Yeah.
You get people across the political spectrum supporting regulation. often for different reasons. People on the left, it may be more about social justice or environment, or and people on the right, it may be more economic and libertarian. Small, my home is my castle and small state. But it interestingly, it means that you do have these fascinating inter-party coalitions. I mean, my organization, Transform, we're not a political, we don't have any political affiliations. We have supporters across all of the parties, from the Green Party to the Reform Party, Nigel Farage and the author of Brexit. And I hate them, but it's a broad church. You need that to get the change to happen.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a communist, but I did this with a right-wing conservative government.
There you go. A perfect illustration. And with cannabis in the US, you see that it has Trump and Kamala Harris supported cannabis legalization in the last election. Yeah, you have people, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer both support legalization. So across it's interesting, and this is a good thing. Yeah, I mean, having support from crazy right-wing populists, it might make us uncomfortable, but the broader the support, the better the chances. Yeah. And drug law reform, cannabis in particular, is surprisingly non-partisan, and we need to try and keep it that way. We need to keep it out of the culture wars. We don't want it to become an issue like trans rights or some stupid thing that becomes, not that's a stupid issue, but we don't want it to become an issue that is polarized along conservative versus liberal, left and right, culture war bullshit.
But it's nice because the drug war started as a culture war. But then it just diffused from it. Yeah. Now it's not cultural anymore.
Yeah, I'm still on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I'm catching enormous heat from I would say right-wing leaning people, because we know who that platform favors now in recent years.
For sure.
I'm catching enormous heat when I talk about other issues. Maybe they consider me woke or etc. Right? But they are many of them are members of Normal. They're telling me to stick to the drug policy. That's the only thing you're good at, and shut the fuck up about everything else. But I know I have bipartisan support, right?
Which is good.
Yeah. And there are some parties in Norway. If you look at the youth parties in Norway, everyone except from the Christian Conservative Party and two other parties, Labour Party, and one more. I can't. Well, it's like a party for farmers, basically.
Oh, okay.
But
huge in the Netherlands. A farmers
yeah. And they were huge in Norway last election. Now they shrank back to where they belong. But the thing is that if you look at
some of them are hemp farmers.
yeah, some of them want to be, but they don't speak up about it. But almost all of the youth parties are pro not only decriminalization but legalization. So I hope, of course, that these young kids grow up to be fine adults who
I
pass the votes left and right.
I do think it's a lesson for all of us in terms of our advocacy.
Yes,
that getting into kind of confrontational sort of gladiatorial battles on Twitter is not helpful. We need to understand different audiences, different communities, what their interests are, what their concerns are, and we need to speak to them. And if that means speaking to conservatives about litter or the smell of weed on the streets, or tax income from a legal market, and how we could spend that on more police, or or protecting young people, we need to speak to them. If we just talk amongst ourselves,
you're right.
We're not going to win.
No, you're right.
So I think listening to different audiences, whether it's public health people or parents or conservatives or religious people, you can make arguments for all of those audiences, and you need to do that. You need to think, who is it you're speaking to? What are their concerns? How do we address them? How do we engage with them in a productive, positive way?
Yeah. For a lot of,
because just having a fight, even if you win the fight, you humiliate them with some brilliant argument. You haven't changed their mind.
You're not going to persuade them.
You've solidified them, and then they will go and tell all their friends that you're an asshole.
Yes,
but also,
and they're probably right.
But also, a lot of the times, the thing that decides for people that are not interested in the topic, if they are pro or against are emotions.
Yes,
It's not
yes.
rationally decided. So if you attack them with data, that's not gonna do anything. That's maybe gonna make them angry or more fearsome. But you need to not exploit the emotion, but to look where their emotion is coming from and to make them feel safer about it.
Mhm.
And that's what we need to do. Yeah.
And you're right about that. My maybe it's cynical, but I totally agree with you. My slogan, I wouldn't say slogan, but I usually say you have to fight emotion with emotion, and you can do it with some numbers, but it's how you present it,
Yeah.
right? Because you see a lot of people. If you ask people in Norway, do you support, for example, legal cannabis? You have a percentage who says yes or no, right? No matter what that number is, if you ask them if they support cannabis available as medicine to people who want it, the percentage it rises, right?
Yeah.
More people are in favor of helping, because I think that touches something that's some emotion in them, right? That you're talking to. And we saw this with the drug policy debate that's been going on, when we talked about the harms of prohibition, harms of being punished, people who are not seeking help for addiction, or even in life-threatening situations, people don't call an ambulance or police because they are in possession of, maybe 15 grams of cannabis. And things like that resonates with the public, definitely. So I think you're very right, but also I think it's really helpful that we have more and more data backing what we stand for.
You need the data.
Yeah, but
showing
you
what
need a
works.
way to communicate it and appeal to the masses, like you're talking about.
Also showing what doesn't work, because there are some examples of bad practice in cannabis legalization, and we need to call them out.
Yeah.
And it's totally legit. He's going, you know what? I don't think that the big tobacco and alcohol companies should be investing in these billion-dollar cannabis corporates and using the same bullshit corporate capture techniques to control the policy agenda in the US. We need to call it out.
Yeah.
And when there are ballot initiatives that are funded by big corporates that basically entrench the markets as a monopoly or oligopoly for those corporates in a new emerging market, it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
And we need to go point it and go, no, that's wrong. We need to do it this way.
Yeah.
Because there is more than one way to do this.
Yeah.
We need to not just advocate for cannabis legalization or another drug legalization regulation. We need to advocate for good, responsible cannabis regulation.
Say rational.
Yeah.
Evidence-based, and it's not always easy because different people in the debate have different priorities.
Yeah.
If you put the cannabis community, they would probably come up with something different, and the libertarians, public health people would do something more like Canada maybe or Uruguay. The environmental people would say, look, you must be growing outdoors, and the parents would say, well, we need to have very strict controls on this and there are competing interests.
Yeah.
All of those people need to be around the table. They all need to be guiding this discussion. But it's happening. It's happening now. It's happening in Norway. Thank God. Maybe Norway will be the next country.
I doubt it. But let's end it there on that happy note of optimism, because when you talked about the trends in the rest of the world and Europe, you did more for my mental health than Norwegian drug policies in years or ever. So let's leave it there with that optimism. And I want to say thank you so much both for coming here tonight. We're actually late in the evening now, and we are in town for Association for Safer Drug Policies Nordic Reform Conference tomorrow, right? And we're all going to speak actually. So I can't wait to hear what you're going to be talking about. And maybe this should be a tradition that we meet here at the City Box Hotel. Not an ad, by the way, to have this conversation, because it was free flowing and really stimulating and interesting, and I can't wait to share it with the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.